Jason, you are an exceptional cook, you're an exceptional baker, and I know that this love of food started with your starring in the kitchen with your grandma, as you call her Granny.
Hmm.
And I can only imagine what it was like for you. You became a florist, which I found interesting. How did you not originally become a chef or a professional pastry chef or a baker of sorts?
Well, I don't know really. I mean, I'd done food all my life growing up with my granny, and I started that at 6 years old. But the thing just kept. My mom had a friend that owned a flower shop, and so I would help her. And then I just loved dealing with flowers, so I still done the cooking and stuff. But then I decided to go into the floral world. So, but then after that, later in years, I started a catering business when I was 15. So I was doing flowers and food all at the same time. And just, I never did feel like that I needed to go to the professional colleges and things to become a chef when I thought I already knew everything that I needed to know. Unbeknownst to me, there was a lot more out there. And of course, I learned it over the years. But I just felt like, I was so busy and could I take the time out to go to culinary school and stuff? And I just never did it. It just never, never really fell into my lap. So I was like, I'm good.
Were you really a cafeteria worker when you, or a manager, I should say, when you started Holiday Baking Championship?
Yes, when I started Holiday Baking Championship, I had sold the flower shop and decided that I was getting to the age I needed something that had retirement insurance and all that good stuff with it. So I had sold the flower shop, still working for the people and helping them, the ones that bought it, to show them the ropes. But I went into the school system, started as a substitute cook, and then a position came open for a manager. And I had been there 6 months. And the school that I worked at, the principal come to me and said, "You've got to apply for this because nobody has ever run this kitchen like you do. I mean, you're not even a manager and you're running the kitchen." So I said, "Oh, okay." So I applied for it and got that job. And of course, I was manager over Iceville Elementary for years. And then also during that time, I wrote all of the recipes for all the schools in the system. And then I worked for, I sat on the board of uh, um, School Nutrition Association for the United States. And then I sat on our local board, Kentucky School Nutrition Association, and would help other schools and wrote a lot of recipes that still are being used in like Texas, Tennessee, West Virginia, Indiana, Ohio, California, places like that. So it's just one of those things. It was food, and I still got to feed people and feed those kids every day. So I just, that I just fell right into that and still had the catering business. So on the weekends, we would cater 5 and 6 weddings on a Saturday every weekend, plus work at the school through the week, plus do everything else. And so I decided on a snow day when we was out of school to apply for holiday baking. And because I thought, oh, I could do this. I'd love to do this. So I applied for it. And the next day they called me and said, "We love what we're seeing." And then, of course, I got accepted. It was one of the contestants and then won it. And that's really where my television career started. They stuck a camera in my face and said, "Just run with it." I went, "Okay, I've never had a camera in my face." And I just treated it as it was somebody I knew. So it was great. I loved it.
I think that's exactly what endeared me and so many people who watch the series to you on this show. I mean, you were just talking to us like we were your friend, and you used, your colorful Jasonisms, Southern isms as well. And I think it just made it so relatable and easy to talk to you because of that. And the judges fell in love with you because of the wonderful baking that you did as well. And you mentioned that you at first you thought at like 15 you knew everything, but was there something about your time on Holiday Baking Championship that you really took to heart and sort of tweaked when it came to your recipes or future baking that you did?
Things that I learned, honey, when I was on holiday baking was not only what I was doing and from the other bakers because we all became friends, but I would learn different things from like Duff and Nancy and Lorraine that I would think, oh, well, that makes sense. Like Duff is always pushing, if you use ginger, always use a little lemon zest or orange zest with it, and it makes the ginger boosted. And of course, I didn't really knew that. I just, honey, I like to make gingerbread, so I'm just throwing all kinds of ginger up in it. But unbeknownst to me, that those zest actually makes ginger even better. And some of the things that they would tell me, I'd say, yeah, I know that, but I don't know why I didn't do it. And they're like, yes, we know you know it, but we don't know why you didn't do it either. But it's just a few things that I learned along the way. And then, of course, there was some things that I even taught Duff and Nancy and Lorraine, like they had never eaten a bean pie before, and Duff loves bean pie now. So it's one of those things that he had never heard of it. And then, of course, sauerkraut cake that I done on there. Nancy is a North, as we call her, a North Southerner. And she had never heard of that heritage recipe. And now she uses my chocolate sauerkraut recipe. And she just loves it. So not only was they teaching me things I didn't really realize, but then I was also teaching them back, so it was kind of that, we were there just having a good time and we forgot about the cameras and just had a great time. And all three of those judges, and of course, all the judges on Food Network Star, we've all became very good friends. Nancy lives not very far from me. So Nancy and I do a lot of stuff together. When I'm out doing events, if Duff is there or Bobby Flay is there or Giada's there, we're always getting together and just having a good time. So,
Well, I rooted for you on Food Network Star. I thought that was the perfect place for you, even maybe even better than a baking championships show, to highlight the wonderful person you are, not just in as a baker, but you're also a chef in your own right, as far as we touched on as well. You cook regular, meals as
yeah.
well. What made you decide to try out for that? Or did they come to you and say, look, we've loved your personality. We let you be who you are. Could you please think about joining Food Network Star?
Well, I was as happy as a raccoon eating corn, honey, when they come to me about Food Network Star. I just won holiday baking and was super thrilled. And I'd always watched Food Network Star, but that's like the granddaddy of all competitions. But they don't do that one now, and I hate that it's gone. But they came to me, the producers, and said, "Would you ever want to be on this?" I'm like, I don't know if I could do that one or not. They're like, "Yes, you can. You can absolutely do that." And I said, "Well, okay." And we'd kind of been throwing around some shows with Food Network after holiday baking that we thought that they would pick up and me be a host of and different things. And so Food Network loved them. And they were like, we love your personality. You were great on holiday baking. You're exactly what we're looking for. We're needing somebody to fill that just down home Southern goodness that everybody knows and love, and you are it. So, let's put those shows aside and let's put you on Food Network Star and let's get you into this competition because I think people need to see even more of what you do. And so I was like, I don't know about it. And they're like, I'm like, let me think about it a little while. And they're like, you got 20 minutes because the window closes in 20 minutes. We got to know. And so I was like, well, okay, what's the worst? I can lose, And so they were like, no, you're never a loser when you make it to Food Network Star. Everybody's a winner because at least you got on there because we have to go through like somewhere between 10 and 12,000 applicants and you're always a winner no matter what you do. And I said, well, thanks. Y'all are just blowing me up like an onion sack so I can come on to television again. And so I done it. And then obviously it was just, it was a super fun experience. It took us 10 weeks to film it. We left LA after filming. I had shot a pilot. I didn't know whether I was going to win or not. I was up against two of my great friends now. And then, of course, I won that. And then that's when I won my show, Best Baker in America. And, of course, it had 4 great season runs. And could have went for the 5th, could have went for 10th, but we had some conflicts with production and stuff. And so we didn't bring it back. But, I'm still on other shows and other shows were still coming out there. But Food Network Star was one of those that I kind of done it backwards. I should have done Food Network Star and then holiday baking because after holiday baking, everybody's like, oh, he don't do savory food. He only does sweet, which is not true. I do both sides. I do savory and sweet, which you hardly ever find anybody that does that, because most people are either they're a pastry chef or they're a savory chef, because savory chefs don't want to deal with pastry. They don't want to be precise because it is a science. Pastry chefs don't want to deal with savory because it's too nilly willy and loosey goosey for them. But I love both sides of it. So there's very few of us out there that do pastry and savory. And I just happen to be one of those because, honey, listen, if anybody's ever seen a picture of me, listen, I ain't as big as a hog wearing a tutu for nothing. Listen, I eat anything, honey. So I'm going to cook both sides of the world. That's just the way it is.
I think that's why people love Duff too, or at least they're surprised to see these things about Duff too, that he can cook both savory and pastry, but he's, known for his pastry work. And I think people knew that about you at first too. And that's why
Yeah.
you've excelled so well on hosting these baking shows, because people got comfortable with you as a pastry person rather than a savory person. And I have to say, I was desperate for you to have your own show. After all these, I kept saying, everyone in my family was like, why doesn't Jason have his own show? Why isn't he hosting and hosting? But I love that you and Carla did The Best Baker in America, because you both played off each other so well. And of course, it's easy to spot you as a judge on the other shows as well. So I'm so excited and so grateful that Food Network continues to bring you back, because I feel like people deserve to see the genuine person you are and the multi-talented you have, whether it's savory and stuff. And of course, you won baking with kids baking, the special kids baking thing too. That shows your rapport that you have with adults and children. So I'm really excited that we got a chance to see you in various aspects and continue to see you on Food Network. But now you have your own book, Lord Honey, which
Yeah.
I was desperate. I'll have to filter it. But there you go. I was desperate to chat with you about, because this is your first cookbook, which blows me away, because I would have thought by now you'd had a whole library created in your spare time. But this is just an exceptional book of traditional Southern recipes that you country bling to it. And I can only imagine how hard it was for you to whittle down these recipes. Are they all a little touched by your granny, or are they some that you created on your own?
So a lot of the reason why I wrote this book took me 4 years to write. And so, well, it's because we are doing everything else in the world too. But doing it in between times, writing it on the plane, flying from place to place, and of course, just sitting down finally and saying, "Okay, it's time. We got to get it together." So, but this book was wrote out of the love of food that my grandmother and I shared as a child, or as I shared as a child, and it's all recipes in this book that is heritage or heirloom recipes that was handed down to me from my grandmothers on both sides, my grandfathers on both sides, my aunts, my uncles, cousins, neighbors, people, friends of mine, of their grandparents. And I wanted to take those recipes that back when our grandparents was young, there's recipes that took them 6, 8 hours to make, and people love those recipes because they're so rich in heritage, and the food is so good that they love it, but they don't have time to really make those meals now because everybody works so hard, and they don't have time for somebody to stay at home and cook all day. I wish they could, but so I said, you know what? I've got to write this book and bring all these great recipes to a book to everybody, that they can take my book, go into a kitchen, pick out a meal from the main course to the side dishes to a dessert to even to breakfast and lunch, that they can do something very quickly. Now, some of the desserts are a little longer than 30 to 45 minutes, but it's one of those things. Baking is a little bit different. But a lot of the recipes, the savory recipes, take you really just minutes to make. I know my quick chicken and dumplings was one of the biggest recipes out of the book that everybody loves. My grandmother and I made that recipe, or I made that recipe with her. That was the first recipe I'd ever made, and first dish. And it took us all day to make because we were on a farm. So we killed the chicken. We had to clean the chicken. We had to cook the chicken. We had to plug, take the meat off the bone. We had to make the dumplings. So it was an all day process. And I thought, why should people go all day and wait on these chicken and dumplings when they could have them in 30 minutes? So the recipe in the book, the quick chicken and dumplings, taste just identical to the ones that I made growing up. And you have them on the table in 30 minutes. Throw in some creamy corn with bacon, honey, and some bourbon blistered bacon baked or green beans. And honey, you
Your
got you a
Trinity.
meal. Yeah, so it's one of those things that I wanted everybody to enjoy this book, not only through the ease of the recipes, but the beautiful photography, the paragraphs on each recipe that tells why that recipe was so near and dear to me or where that recipe may have come from. And that's something you don't really see in cookbooks. I studied cookbooks for years. I have a collection. I have over 6,000 cookbooks. And there is not another cookbook that's wrote like the cookbook that on my first cookbook. And even the publishing company, when we were working on it, they're like, we have never seen a cookbook wrote like this. This is the most awesome thing we've ever seen. I don't know if we're going to be able to hold back the people. I don't know if we can get enough printed from, so it was one of those things that, at first they were hesitant. They're like, this book is so good. It's actually unreal. What are we going to do? And so it took them a little while to pick it up. And then they finally said, you know what, we're pulling the trigger. We've got to have this book. So they picked it up. And before we ever hit the market with it, even in pre-sales, we were already into the books that had been ordered. And after the book launched on August the 28th, it actually went so large in people coming to the first three book stops and people trying to get it out of the stores that it clogged up Amazon's system and shut down the shipping system. And people couldn't get their dang books on time because Amazon's system wouldn't hold the orders that was coming in. And so we were like, well, that's one good problem to have,
It's a
but it's
blessing and a
bad for
curse.
yeah, it is. And I was like, oh my God, the viewers has got to get this in their hands. How am I going to explain to them? They think I'm holding their books for ransom. And I'm like, I'm not, guys. Listen, it's coming. They're all first run edition. We have a lot of first run edition. The first run edition just means that for the first year and 2 months, those are the books that actually are printed first. After that year and 2 months is the second run edition. It's still the same book, children, but if you're a collector, you want first run book. And I was like, what is all this first run, second run? I don't even know what these people are talking about. But anyway, yeah, this book was wrote out of a lot of love for food and just me wanting to bring that great heritage to people, those great flavors, and a lot quicker.
I'm actually surprised by some of the recipes. Didn't even familiar with rice for breakfast, and there's so many special recipes throughout. I can't imagine the process for having you to figure out which ones to include and which ones you bittersweet had to let go. Have you already did you decide, okay, well, here's some that I need to have because they're most requested by the people who eat my food, and then here's a list of things I love, but I really have to put off for maybe another cookbook to
Yes,
come.
so it's a process of picking out recipes. So the way that I've done the recipes, I have over 3 or 4 thousand recipes that was handed down to me through the years. And I could only have so many in a cookbook without it being so heavy, you need a wheelbarrow to push it around. So it was one of those things. I went through recipes and I picked out things that I loved as a child in a lot of the sections. And then I picked out recipes that I was just like, people have got to know about this because it's so unusual that we had it in the South growing up, but most people don't realize that. And there's a lot of recipes. I was like, okay, I have 2 recipes. If I take those 2 recipes and make them into one dish, we get the best of both worlds. So I was changing things around, just like the warm kale and butternut squash salad. That is 2 recipes that I put together and pared it down and made it quick. We grew up with this dish called jollof, which is fresh lettuce or a type of green. It could be kale, it could be lettuce, it could be whatever. And then we would put in green onions and then salt it a little bit and take a pound of bacon, 2 pounds, it was my choice, and fry it down and then drizzle that hot bacon grease over the greens and melt them down and wilt them down, and then put the bacon in there. And that was really a salad that we ate with a salad that we ate with our dinner growing up. And so I thought, how can I make this with the butternut squash that I love, that my grandmother and I used to roast with all these great, fresh herbs and stuff out of the garden? How can I put these two together? And so I thought, you know what? I could make these two into what I call jollop, or wilted kale, or a warm kale and butternut squash salad. So I took those two and put it together and come up with a new recipe, but they were born from two very old recipes. And so, you find a lot of that through the book. So a lot of my favorites, like one of my favorite things for breakfast is rice. We had rice growing up because we had to have quick stuff. I mean, we had biscuits and gravy and, all that stuff a lot, but not every single day. And so there was days we had to have a quick breakfast, and rice was one of those things that we would have. And why not throw some berries on it? Because, honey, everybody loves a good berry. So it was just one of those things that, I had in there in the book. But there's a lot, most of everything in that book is either something I've had growing up, or I've eaten of somebody's, like, at a church picnic or at a social picnic in the neighborhood, or, or it was a family member of one of my friends that I've ate at their house thinking this is great. And then them say, oh, this is the heirloom, it was passed down. And so I would say, you know what? I love this recipe. It's got to be in my book. Like the chicken squares is one of my best friends in the world, Nicole's mom's recipe that her grandmother had gave to her. And so, but I had to change it because the bread in the recipe to make the chicken squares, you can't get any longer. So I done crescent rolls, which is very quick. Everybody can find crescent rolls, and then they can, still do things that quick. So I'm always thinking about what makes it easier for everybody at home. What makes it easy for that shopper to run into store? What makes it easy to get a meal on a table for the kids or your family or just you and your honeys, to get back around your table again, to stop eating in front of the television or to eating on the run, but to put down our phones and to make a nice meal and sit around the table and talk like we did when I was growing up. And so that's what I think every time I go into a recipe.
And I love there's little tips too that really give you that extra thing that you need to make sure your butter is cold and stuff like that. And I see that a lot on the baking shows and different food shows that you watch as well, because there are things that go wrong and you wonder, oh, what's going wrong with this person's recipe? And you don't know. So these tips, I think, that you add as little bonuses and little
Mm-hmm.
yellow squares are the extra oomph that you give, the extra little advice, like, okay, if I'm here over your shoulder, keep in mind this while you're making it. It's a little bit of extra
Yeah.
added advice that if you were there advising them on how to really, like, looking over their shoulder to make these recipes,
Yeah.
that would help them as well.
Yeah. And all those little boxes have my little rooster that's looking right over saying, look at me, look at me, So the tips is really what makes a recipe. If you have never made a recipe before and don't know the tips in a recipe, sometimes it can go very wrong. A recipe is just a guide for us. And so if we know those tips, I've already screwed it up 2 or 3 times and had to throw it out to the chickens. So that's where the tips come from. So maybe you all want, as a viewer and a fan and a cook in the kitchen doing these recipes, you can read those tips and go, okay, he's already messed this one up, but here's a tip. If I follow his tip, then I'm not going to mess it up. And so it's, listen, I've eaten a lot of burnt rice, trust me. And so, all those little tips just help you all be, in the whole world, to be better cooks as we go along. You don't have to be the best cook in the world to even use this recipe book. Like, I've got a friend, honey, she can't even boil water. But listen, she can make those chicken and dumplings and it tastes just like mine every time. That's the only recipe that she makes out of the cookbook, but simply because she'll make it 3 or 4 times a week. I'm like, girl, you're going to have Crisco to get through the door, honey. You got to stop eating all them dumplings. But anyway, I mean, it's just one of those things. You don't have to be, honey. I have people that's buying this book that don't cook. They're like, I don't never cook, but I can tell you, I want this book because it's not just a recipe guide. And like I explained to people, this book is a roadmap of my life. And not only, every recipe has that great paragraph on it. The beginnings of each section tells you what that section is about. There's a family photo album in there. You know, Carla Hall, one of my Southern besties, she's my Southern sister from another mister, wrote the forward in the book. My Nana, my Nancy Fuller, she wrote a paragraph on the back of the book. And so they endorsed the book. My friend Scott Conant, Marcella Valdelee, Rachel Ray, J.D. Shelburne, Wendell from Survivor. You know, a lot of people are, you know, pushing this book because they loved it so much themselves. And so it's one of those things that I want people just to get this book and enjoy it. And, you know, when you read each recipe, you should read it in my accent in your head. You know, that makes you kind of understand it a little bit better. And, but it, you know, it's those tips is really what makes a recipe come to life. And a lot of recipes never do that. They need you to figure it out on your own. And I don't want you to have to do that.
What does it mean to you then that so many celebrity chefs, so many people, even regular people, actually, I should say as well, come up to you and really tell you how much your recipes or even your personality really means to them, or how much they appreciate all the wonderful authenticity you bring to the recipes and the work you do on our screens?
You know, I've always been a humble person. My grandmother instilled that. My mama instilled that in me very young on. And I'm one of those people, when I hear all this, I'm like, I can't believe y'all saying this. I'm just a country, dirt poor old boy from Kentucky that just loves to watch people eat and have a good time. And I love making people laugh, because if you're having the worst day in the world, if you can just laugh for 5 minutes at something I've said or something I'm doing, or something you read in the book or something, then I have fulfilled my goal in this life, because I'm all about having fun. I'm all about making people's day. I'm all about that good old food, honey, nourishing your body, honey. And, you know, people tell me that, you know, like Scott Conant is a very near and dear friend of mine. And I look up to him so much because he is the master of pasta, which, you know, pasta and me go way back. But I mean, look, these hips, honey, it didn't get that way, but not even pasta. But you know, when he got his book, he called me and he said, I just cannot with you. And I said, what's wrong? And he said, this book, I'm just like almost in tears reading. I'm emotional. It's just you have wrote something here that not only feeds people's bellies, but will feed their minds and make them, it gives me goosebumps just talking about it, and make them realize that we are living in such a fast-paced world. We've got to slow down and enjoy our families, enjoy our friends. And, you know, he's just like, I'm like, honey, get you a box of tissues. You need to calm down. And, you know, he's like, this is awesome. And of course, he's posted about it several times and different things. But he's like, you know, I'm not a Southern. I love your food. I cook for Scott all the time. I love your food. You know, but I don't never look at myself as a Southern cook. But now with your recipe book, I can be a Southern cook. I won't have your accent, but I can have your fried chicken on my table. I'm like, that's right, honey. You ain't never going to have this accent, but that's all right. But, you know, it touches my heart. It touches my soul. It just, it makes me know and feel that my goal that I had set out for this book is really doing what it was meant to be. What, you know, what was laid in my head and my mind and in my lap and in front of me is now in a book, and people is seeing that, and it's making them happy. So, you know, when Nancy Fuller got her book, she called me in tears. Oh my God, Jason, oh my God, I can't believe this is the most awesome book. You know, it's so great. I've never seen a cookbook like this. I wish you had wrote my cookbook. I'm like, girl, I wish I'd wrote your cookbook too. But, you know, I mean, it's just one of those things. It really does. I'm very humbled by it. When I first opened up my book, when it was shipped to me, it was flown to me from the thing. The very first book came to me. When I opened it up, I just sat down and wept, honey, like a little schoolyard girl that had her balls taken away from her. But, you know, and it's a lot. You know, I just want everybody to just really enjoy this book. You know, love this book, use this book. Don't use it to prop your bed up at nighttime. That's not a good place to use it for. But, you know, lay in the bed and read the passages, lay in, you know, and then get up in the middle of the night and fix you some fried chicken, you know. But, you know, I want people just to have a good time. Don't just throw it on the coffee table, you know, honey. It is a testament of my life. And it's been such a big testament that, you know, this is something I've been able to tell since last Friday. it's been such a big testament to the public and to myself and everybody else that already has the book and the ones that haven't got them that's on their way, that we just signed our contract to do the second cookbook, which is coming out very soon. So in between all of this cookbook tour, I get to write another cookbook. So, and the name of it, hold on to your horses, honey. It is Lord Honey, 8 ingredients or less decadent desserts. Mm-hmm. So it's coming out. It'll be out quick. It'll be out at the latter part of 2024 or the first part of 2025. So, but yeah, so it's I had no words. And listen, I can talk. Listen, I talk my sleep. I had no words though when they called me and said this book is doing more than we had ever anticipated. We anticipated a lot with this book. We anticipate a lot because of you, because of your personality in the book, how great it is. So guess what? We've got to have another. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to give you another. So